It is October 9th, and I just finished, I guess, probably good timing. I finished a clip about CPS. And I had intended to talk about what happened after I had the psychological evaluation, but then in trying to mention how CPS was not honoring, it was really pointless. I ended up talking about some of the dynamics of Child Protective Services, and I guess tried to warn other parents who are dealing with them, because since it came up, it did come to my mind, and I've made a clip already about it, about CPS, and why I think that that entire department needs to be cut from the United States federal budget. But I wanted to, I guess, add a couple things that came to mind, or some of the motives that are behind the operations, and why it's basically it's set up to work against families. I think one of the strongest points is that I've made in the past is that it takes the focus away from actual crimes done to children and puts the attention on use of children and very small things, just taking kids away from parents because of dishes in the sink or something like that. And people talk about that a lot, dishes in the sink, and how CPS shouldn't do that. But what they don't talk about as much as why it diverts all of the energy away from the actual crimes that are occurring. That's why you hear about CPS not, like children dying because CPS doesn't investigate. Because, they're busy looking into the dirty house situation when somebody wants to get that kid away from the mother because they don't like her philosophies and how she's going to raise her child, or because they want to punish a parent, or because they have a family in line that's waiting to adopt that child. So while CPS is taking eligible children away from single mothers and single fathers and low-income mother and father households so that they can be adopted out to other families, the actual crimes against children that are really occurring, where kids are about to die, that's the attention isn't going there. Maybe it's because nobody really cares if those kids die, because they're not the ones that are being targeted for United States research, or they're not the ones that somebody wants to adopt and so wants in good condition, at least to start with. And that's why the last time I talked about CPS, I said that Child Protective Services needs to lose all of its funding. It needs to get the axe out of the federal budget, or the axe from the federal budget, and anything having to do with children at all needs to be handled by the police, who are trained to do investigations. Lunch ladies do not know how to do investigations. Sorry, but there's a hard enough time getting police officers to do decent investigations and not be corrupt. We don't need the nitpicky lunch ladies doing investigations of children, do we? I mean, nobody does. They don't know what kind of facts are necessary, and so half the time, if they involve somebody into something, a situation where they want to take a child away, they're not involving the police, they're involving the Attorney General. And the Attorney General is, I used to think that the Attorney General protected consumer interests, like, citizen interests. But for those who don't know, the Attorney General also protects the interests of the United States. That is their main objective. The main objective of the Attorney General is to protect United States employees. So when United States employees are using Child Protective Services to take your kids away from you when you're innocent and they just want to use them for research. The Attorney General is their backing organization. And they're going to be the ones to help the government if the government wants to handpick kids to take away. They're going to be the ones who will possibly be first in line in figuring out ways to do that. Things to use against a parent. The right, it's really sick. It's actually very sick, because when you start thinking about it, in order to do that, in order for the federal government to even be able to do that undetected, they have to have somebody who is a total liar that they can count on with visitation, to do the visitation, writing up visitation with the parent and child. So they have to find somebody who is a visitation monitor that is willing to lie for the government. And lie about the parent, make the parent sound as bad as possible. They have to rely upon public defenders that are willing to lie for the government. They are also reliant upon a judge that's willing to lie for the government. So in order to do any of these things, they have to think ahead of time. They have to put people in those positions. It's kind of like the United States now, ever since they've decided to get so involved in this whole anti-terrorism thing, they're always tracking the foreign students' money, right? So we have foreign students that are coming over from the Middle East, and they have to get financial aid or make arrangements with a college in order to study anywhere. Well, we have heightened interest by the FBI, who specializes in counterterrorism, to have people in place at colleges to be able to review any kind of application and financial aid monies that are going to foreign students. They want to know where they're from, how much money they have, what their contact information is, and the FBI wants a way to do it discreetly. So they're going to have people working for them at colleges. They already know this. So they make sure that they have those gaps closed. And it's the same thing with Child Protective Services. When the CIA and the military are taking children and assaulting them and using them for government programming and or torturing kids because of personal vendettas through people who just have contacts with the military or CIA, they also have to have people in place who have their back, who are going to be willing to lie and create a seamless appearance of for a factual basis for taking a child from the parent. They can't have, if the government takes a kid away from an innocent parent, and they're torturing the parent and the child, they can't have 8 people who are all lying and saying these horrible things about the parent, and then have 2 that somehow throw everything askew, who bring up all these questions saying everything is normal. They start writing visitation notes that are completely contrary to the official stance. You can't even have one person. Maybe one person you could possibly get rid of if you have one person who gets into the mix and starts talking about how there's something suspicious about the case. But as much as possible, they're going to already have people lined up and make sure that it doesn't go outside of their little seamless circle. Which, there were some CPS people who wondered why Wenatchee wanted their hands so tightly on this case. And it's because they already knew who their people were. They knew who to keep it with. However, that doesn't mean that other CPS workers in other jurisdictions don't do the exact same thing and wouldn't have necessarily done the exact same thing. It's just that since Wenatchee already knew people, they already knew who to pass it on to. But the federal government, has to have, basically, when I said it's sick, what's sick to me is that they have spies, literally. This sounds crazy, but they, if we're calling a spade, the federal government has spies in Child Protective Services who work for them. Which is not something that anybody would ever imagine. When you think of spies and you think of, people who leave the country to spy on other people, if you're talking about a real spy. But no, when this country is using children and torturing them and using them for government programming, and it's the CIA military, they need their spies to torture and train the kids to begin with. And if they don't like what a parent is doing or what philosophies a parent has, they'll even use their spies to torture the parent and torture the kid. And it really sounds really wild, doesn't it? Because it sounds bad enough to just say CPS is corrupt and throw that out there. But then to make it sound like it's a spy agency sounds a little bit extreme. And I'm not saying that everybody works for CPS as a spy. What I'm saying is that if they take, in the situations where they take kids away from innocent parents, they have to have spies. And spies who are willing to do really horrible things. In the name of the government, or the people who have a vendetta against the innocent parent that work for the government. Okay, so I think I've said what I want to say about CPS for today. After the psychological evaluation that I was told to go to, I had to take a Greyhound bus back. And again, it was one of these things where the bus driver didn't act quite as nervous on the way back, maybe, as on the way over, but still acted really weird. And there were people driving up alongside the bus very closely. It was just very chaotic. It felt dangerous. I actually, one time had said that at different times, I'm not psychic at all, but I sometimes am intuitive a little bit, or I might get a feeling about something. Not that my feelings are always right, but sometimes in Washington, D.C., I could feel this palpable presence of danger from somewhere. And I just always figured that it's because there's so many different countries and embassies, and there is a little bit of danger, because there's dangerous things that are being done, and talked about and that kind of thing. And I never knew where it was coming from, but I just kind of sensed that a little bit. And then sometimes, things felt really like everything was fine and good, and then things seemed to go really downhill fast with my sense of the mood of the environment, or things maybe going around in the periphery. And I went to Washington, and Washington's one of the most, Wenatchee, Washington has ended up being one of the most corrupt places I've ever lived. And I didn't sense that same kind of danger initially or anything. But I did when I was in Seattle, and during that whole time when I had to go to that psychological evaluation, that entire period, it was very dangerous. And I don't know why I didn't sense danger before. Like my bus previously was hitting a huge boulder, and almost everybody was dying. We were almost all dying. And there have been many other situations where something really bad has happened or been planned, and